On the morning of October 30th, 1929, President Herbert Hoover woke the day after the biggest one-day stock market crash in American history, surveyed the state of the U.S. economy and declared, and I quote, "The fundamental business of the country, that is, production and distribution of commodities, is on a sound and prosperous basis," end of quote. In the weeks and months after that, President Hoover remained in an economic bubble, unaware of the extreme suffering of ordinary Americans, even declaring that anyone who questioned the state of the economy was, and I quote, "a fool." For Herbert Hoover, I guess ignorance was bliss. And it wasn't until the American people replaced this out-of-touch Republican president with a Democrat, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that our nation's economic recovery began. Yesterday, nearly 80 years after the Hoover administration took America with blissful ignorance into a depression, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped more than 500 points, 504 points to be exact, the biggest one-day decline since trading opened after the attacks of 9/11. With one major investment bank headed for bankruptcy, another sold at bargain-based price, and one of the largest insurance companies teetering, investors rushed to sell their shares, not only in America, but all over the world. With our financial markets reeling, the American people are wondering whether they will lose their jobs, whether they'll be able to pay their child's next tuition bill, whether their pension and retirement savings will be safe, Mr. President, even whether their bank will survive. There's no reason to think that we're headed into an economic depression. I believe there's no reason to panic. Yet, one senator, John McCain, woke up yesterday, surveyed the state of the U.S. economy, summoned the ghost of his fellow Republican, Herbert Hoover, and declared, and I quote, "The fundamentals of our economy are strong," end of quote. For whom are the fundamentals of the economy strong, Mr. President? Certainly not the 606,000 people who have lost their jobs this year in America. Certainly, it's not strong for the commuters and truckers who are sending more and more of their hard-earned dollars overseas to pay for fuel. Certainly, our economy is not strong for those struggling to make one paycheck last until the next, with record home heating prices looming in the winter months and the price of oil teetering for a gallon of gasoline around $4 a gallon. It's not strong for the cities and towns that have been forced to cut back on police, schools, firefighters because their tax base is shrinking. It's certainly not strong for the millions of families who have or may soon lose their homes, or for the tens of millions who are seeing their home equity plummet. No matter what George Bush, John McCain, or the ghost of Herbert Hoover may think, this economy is not strong. The American people deserve better. Mr. President, this is not a time for panic, I repeat, but it is a time to look back on the past 8 years of Bush-Hoover-McCain economics and figure out what brought us to the point so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. And the truth is really tragic. This disaster was avoidable. It's avoidable, and Mr. President, in its palpable disdain for all things relating to government, the Bush-Cheney administration willfully neglected the government's most important function, to safeguard the American people from harm. Not only physical harm, but economic harm. In their simplistic philosophy of big business equals good government equals bad. Big business equals good, government equals bad. The administration of the Republican Congress failed to conduct oversight and just let the financial sector go wild. Without anyone regulating their actions, market excesses destroyed the financial prudence that allowed a firm like Lehman Brothers to prosper for 158 years. Vast fortunes were made virtually overnight, and now vast fortunes have been lost literally overnight. Mr. President, yesterday we heard that Hewlett-Packard laid off 25,000 people yesterday. There's some talk now that Lehman Brothers, somebody may buy them. And instead of losing 25,000 jobs, they'll only lose 15,000 jobs. Well, I hope that's the case. For those 10,000, that's for sure. The unfortunate irony is that the Bush administration's zeal to favor big business has now crippled it. and left the American people to pay the price. President Bush did nothing to stop this disaster, and now it's clear he'll leave the mess to the next president. Now our nation must decide who is better suited to end Bush-Hoover economics and return sanity and security to our economy. Senator McCain says the economy is not his strong suit. Mr. President, that is an understatement. But that's what John McCain said about himself. So John McCain went searching for an economic advisor who could bolster his weakness. Who'd he choose? Phil Gramm. I've served with Phil Gramm here in the Senate. The same Phil Gramm who, as a senator, was responsible for deregulation in the financial service industry that paved the way for much of this crisis to occur. I like Phil Gramm, but I don't like his economics. A respected economist at the University of Texas, now that's where Phil Gramm taught, in Texas. A respected economist at the University of Texas, James Galber, said that Gramm was, and I quote, the most aggressive advocate of every predatory and rapacious element that the financial sector has. And went on to say he's a sorcerer's apprentice of instability and disaster in the financial system, end of quote. Mr. President, listen to what this man said. A respected economist at the University of Texas about Phil Gramm, the most aggressive advocate of every predatory and rapacious element that the financial sector has. He's a sorcerer's apprentice of instability and disaster in the financial system. That's what he said. It was Phil Gramm who pushed the legislation through a Republican Senate that allowed firms like Enron to avoid regulation and destroy the life savings of its employees. And it was Phil Gramm's legislation that now allows Wall Street traders to bid up the price of oil, leaving us to pay the bill. Warren Buffett called the result of Graham's legislation, I quote, financial weapons of mass destruction. That's what Warren Buffett said. And now the architect and leading cheerleader for every mistake and neglect that created the Bush-Cheney financial nightmare is whispering into the ear of John McCain, who says he doesn't know much about the economy. I repeat, that's an understatement. It's obvious by saying yesterday that the economy looked okay. Whether you call it Hoover economics, Bush economics, or McCain economics, it's not a recipe for change, it's a recipe for more of the same.